What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video here today. Here I've got something a little bit different for you, something that I haven't tried out yet, but something that's gotten very popular over the past few weeks or so, and that is Jeskai Queller, or Jeskai Flash, or whatever you want to call it. It's slightly different than Jeskai Flash, I would say, but, you know, it's kind of its new Jeskai archetype, and I would say that's Queller would be the best name for it. But anyways, the deck itself plays a lot like Jeskai Flash or Jeskai Control, in the sense that it plays mostly at instant speed outside of Serum Visions. So basically, you're generally going to do things on your opponent's turn, which makes things difficult for your opponent. They have to think through a lot of lines because nothing that they play is, ensured to resolve, especially when you're keeping up 3, 4, 5 mana each turn with 3, 4 cards in hand. Your opponent has to think about so many things, and they just have to do their best to play around whatever combination of cards they can think of. And I think that's one of the best parts of the deck here, is that it can attack the opponent from so many different angles, all during their turn. So that's going to be the general overview. But basically, you're going to be just like a Jeskai Flash, Jeskai Burn, Jeskai Control deck. So you run some of the best burn spells that Jeskai has to offer. That's going to be 4 Lightning Bolts, 4 Helixes, 2 Electrolyzes. You run 4 Path to Exiles. It's one of the best removal spells in the format right now to hit Shadow. You run 4 set of basically 2 mana counter spells. It's going to be Mana Leak and Logic Knot. The reason we run the split here is because while a lot of lists used to play 4 Logic Knot, which of course, is way, way, way better in the late game, there have been situations, especially when you're playing Colonnade, especially when you're playing Spire Bluff Canal, when you're playing Sulphur Falls, when you're playing just Shocklands and Basics, there's going to be situations where you don't always have a fetch or something in the graveyard to exile on turn 2 or maybe even turn 3. It's kind of important to maintain that early game tempo so you can actually reach Cryptic Command mana, so you can actually reach Spell Queller mana. So I like this 2-2 split, because while Logic Knot can be live on turn 2, it's not always the case. So having that split just adds a little bit more consistency to your early game, and it doesn't detract too much from your late game from my experiences, although there are definitely situations where Mana Leak can be dead. Anyways, moving on from that point, basically, you play all these early removal spells, these counter spells, and you want to make it to this sweet spot over here. So this 3-4 mana spot. You can generate a lot of value with Electrolyze against certain decks. Spell Queller is one of your absolute best cards in the deck. Just counter your opponent's spell and then start beating them down, put them into burn range, end up burning them out, or hit them with a Colonnade and then burn them out. There's a lot of ways for this deck to actually close out a game. And then also 4 Cryptic Command, just one of the best cards in the deck. You just want to counter your opponent's spells, tap down their team, draw cards. It does everything you want to do. Return a pesky permanent to your opponent's hand, like a Chalice of the Void. That way you can Path to Exile their Thought-Knot Seer. It's just this versatile card that can help you get out of some very uncomfortable situations, especially during Game 1. It's so versatile. I love Cryptic Command, and I think lists that play any less than 3, you're doing it wrong, and if you're not playing 4, you better have a really good reason to not play 4 in a deck like this. And then, so usually this deck used to play 4 Spell Queller, 4 Electrolyze. I think Electrolyze, especially now that Counters Company has gone down in the meta, it's not 100% a great card, but it's still nice to have a couple. So I've diversified this 3 mana slot with Vendilion Clique, which is something that a lot of people have already tried, and to keep things fresh and interesting, I'm going to try this one of Nimble Obstructionist, which is a new card from Hour of Devastation. And it's a card that caught a lot of people's eye, but, it's a little slow. It's 3 mana to maybe counter some sort of target activator or trigger ability. So from my experiences with the card so far, I've been able to counter my opponent's fetch on turn 3, which sets them back a turn. I've also been able to counter a draw card trigger from Street Wraith. So I only played about 2 games here, or 3 games. So it didn't come up very often, but when I did draw it, it was actually pretty solid card, and I actually flashed it in against Living End and started beating down. It was I would say this card is above average, and it's it's definitely worth testing in this 3 mana slot that we have here, that we have space for. But if we don't like it, I would definitely see upping up to an electrolyze or a second Vendilion click or like a condemn if you want to start hitting shadow or something like that. But otherwise, that's the deck for you. Of course, I didn't mention, but we have 4 Snapcaster Mages, 4 Serum Visions, of course. Um, 2 of the very best blue cards in the format right now. Serum Visions helps fixing. With all your instant sorcery, Snapcaster Mage is almost never, never, a dead card, and it's oftentimes one of your best cards in the deck, especially when you get up to 6-5 mana range where you can start flashing back electrolyzes, cryptic commands. It generates so much value. Alright, so that's the overall main board gist. And now let's go to the sideboard bit. So definitely one of the scariest decks out there for this deck right now is going to be Dredge. So you have Anger of the Gods and Rest in Peace as your 4 main pieces of hate against Dredge. Rest in Peace can also come in against Living End, can also come in against Grixis Shadow. Generally, I'm not sure how many you're supposed to bring in against Grixis Shadow. Usually I've brought in 1 Rest in Peace, but 2 might also be correct. So that's going to be your package for those kinds of decks. I do like Stony Silence a lot still in the format. I would love to find a room for a second one, but I think with 3 rejections and 1 Stony Silence, you're in a pretty good spot to beat both Affinity and Eldrazi Tron, and also still have game against Lantern Control here. So I do like this kind of colorless package hate that we've got going for us here. We got 1 Dispel, 1 Negate, because Control is rising in the meta, and I like having ways to deal with them. On that topic of Control, I really like Geist of St. Traft as well. Also against, I know it's not conventional, but I've also been able to bring it in against Grixis Shadow, and it really frustrates them, especially if they're on the Liliana the Last Hope plan. It's going to be very difficult for them to be able to attack favorably if you have a Geist on board, and if they're just trying to, obviously they won't have many removal spells at that point in the game, in game 2 and 3. So you should be relatively well positioned to jam a Geist and just ride it to victory, hopefully. And then we have these last 3 pack cards over here. This is kind of my anti-shadow package. Celestial Purge I found is really important, not because it can just exile either Gurmag Angler, Tasigur, or Death Shadow, but it can also hit either Liliana the Veil or Liliana the Last Hope. Generally in game 2 and 3, we side out some amount of burn. We don't want to keep all of it in, so we have less ways to interact with Planeswalkers. So I like having this kind of catch-all removal spell for basically every threat in their deck. It definitely helps deal with some of their most troublesome permanents, especially because we don't play cards like Detention Sphere in the 75. And then we also play Blessed Alliance. It can come in against Burn, comes in against Eldrazi Tron. It's a removal spell that dodges Chalice on 1, which is pretty important. And then we also have Condemn here, just another single hate piece against Shadow. Not sure if it's necessary. Maybe I'm hedging too much against Shadow, but I think it'll do a decent amount of work if we do draw it. And it can also come in against Burn or other aggressive matchups, and even Eldrazi Tron. And the issue is, of course, it doesn't get around Chalice of the Void, but there's only so much you can play around Chalice of the Void. So cards that I wouldn't mind having in the 75, maybe like a Wear and Tear. I just couldn't find the space for it today, but in the future, if you're thinking about building this deck, definitely consider cards like Wear and Tear or Supreme Verdict as other options that you could be running in your sideboard. But yeah, that's going to be the main deck here for you, and the sideboard for Jeskai Queller. So hopefully stick around for 5 matches in a modern competitive league. We're going to run it through and see how it performs in the meta right now. All right, so stay tuned and see you soon. All right, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the first match here with Jeskai Queller. We won the die roll, and yes, we would love to play first. All right, let's take a look at our opener here. It's a little slow. All right, so this is 5 lands, no interaction until turn 3. So if we're up against a slower deck, it could be good enough. I would say in the dark, I would keep this, especially because we're on the play. So let's just run out Colonnade and pass the turn. See what we're up against here. Alright, Scalding Tarn. If this is Shadow, this is a pretty bad hand against Shadow. We could easily get our hand stripped apart here and then have no interaction. So definitely a riskier keep. But it looks like that's what our opponent is on. Alright, good thing they started with Serum Visions and not some sort of Thoughtseize effect. And by leading with Colonnades, we could potentially make our opponent think that we're on blue-white control, and maybe they might make certain decisions. Anyways, that Colonnade draw was pretty bad. Yeah. I'm not gonna F6, so our opponent might not. Yeah. So if we'll pretend that we can keep up like Path to Exile here. So if our opponent wants to run out, like, yeah. So this is where the jig is up, basically. And we're gonna need to find some action pretty soon. Thankfully, our opponent has a relatively slower start here. So they took Snapcaster Mage, which makes a lot of sense. Fortunately, we've just drawn straight lands. So we're not going to fire off this Electrolyze unless we have to. Like if our opponent plays some sort of like Thoughtseize type effect. But thankfully our opponent is hopefully flooded on like Fatal Pushes in hand, which is not necessarily a good thing considering that Colonnade might be our best way to win here. So right now we're looking for any threat. Snapcaster Mage would also be fine. Some sort of action. Path to Exile would also be pretty good here. Yeah, I'll go ahead and run it out there. And so we're in a really rough spot here. So this is one of the problems of keeping a 5-lander, because we drew just straight lands in a row. And here comes Death Shadow. Yeah. All right, that's a great draw, and I'm actually gonna fire it off right now, to avoid getting Stubborn Denialed. They do run a lot of that these days, so I'm still just gonna run out the Steam Vents. Our opponent knows the entire contents of our hand here, but they are dead to 2 Colonnade hits. So I suspect that they probably have some sort of Delve threat in hand. They've cycled through a lot of their deck. I actually haven't been checking their scries. Probably should have been doing that, right? Bottom. So that's a good sign for us, right? Oh, Street Wraith. Okay. Meaning they drew a card that they don't know about. Wow. Okay. Let's go ahead and... So because we've already got our basic planes, let's just go ahead and fetch up here a basic island using the Flooded Strand because it is the worst fetch land here. Serum Vision's a decent draw. Snapcaster Mage also a pretty good card on top, right? So we don't want to see that Sulfur Falls. Snapcaster Mage is a pretty great draw. Question is, do we want to draw it? I think so, right? We want to. Let's go ahead and draw it. We can keep up Path to Exile. Spell Queller, also not a bad card. It can help to apply pressure, and it can also help fight over a potential Stubborn Denial fight, as we can basically counter Stubborn Denial. So our opponent using their fetch lands here is actually pretty good for us. Reason being, they will not be able to trigger Revolt as easily, and that is one of the best ways for them to deal with Spell Queller, and that's going to be to crack a fetch, Fatal Push Spell Queller. Alright, so tap land is good for us. And here we're in a pretty good spot. So I don't want to shuffle because it will mess up some of our scries. We've put a lot of lands to the bottom. So here, let's just go ahead and pass the turn. We're in no rush. And end of turn, we can go either snap Electrolyze or just run out Spell Queller. And running out Spell Queller might just be the smarter thing to do, honestly. because they'll have to trigger Revolt some way. So we're not going to... The reason we didn't attack with Colonnade here... Alright, are they going to run out of Snapcaster Mage here? K-Command. Interesting. Return Street Wraith. Deals 2 damage to target creature or player. Is this worth spell quelling? What are the chances they have fetch plus fatal push in hand? I don't think the chances are that high. However, like they're returning street. I think I'll go ahead and spell queller this. I think it's worth it. They're going to have a pretty tough time actually dealing with our spell queller here. Yep, we'll go ahead and get their Kolaghan's command. Alright, oh, so maybe they're playing Lightning Bolt. Okay, alright, so I didn't expect that. But some lists are running Lightning Bolt these days. This is especially important to get around things like Mirror and Crusader, which have Pro Black, which cause a massive headache for excuse me, Grixis Shadow. A little brain fart there. Alright, so I assume our opponent's going to choose the same modes, more or less. And we'll see how our opponent decides to play this. So the scariest thing our opponent could have at this point, sure. Yeah. Oh, deals 2 damage. Interesting. So they're not even going to make me discard a card right now. If they're going to cycle Street Wraith, go down to 3 life, that is very risky. Thought Scour themselves, sure. I guess though, if they have a Death Shadow, all right. So they have a fetch here. I think obviously I'm not running out Snapcaster Mage. Electrolyze is a great draw here, and I'm not going to attack with Colonnade either. So next turn I have the choice of Electrolyze my opponent's face, or I can go Snap Electrolyze. But there's a we may want to save. Wow, so they're just casting Street Wraith. Interesting. Very interesting. Alright, so I think we can set up. Alright, sorry, so let's think through the best line here. We're pretty set to win here. We can go Snap Path. We're at 7 mana. If we go Snap Path, they'll be forced to crack this. We'll rev up Colonnade on our turn. Yeah, I think this is a win-win situation for us here. I don't think there's any scenario which we can lose. So we're just gonna do our thing here. Cast Snapcaster Mage. Alright, our opponent concedes. Writing is on the wall. Okay, so for this matchup, Condemn comes in, Blessed Alliance comes in, Celestial Purge comes in, some amount of Rest in Peace are going to come in as well, and maybe even Geist of St. Traff. So honestly, I think Electrolyze is one of the worst cards in this matchup. Definitely want to cut a few Electrolyzes here. Mana Leak's not the best, but not the worst. Let's see if we can cut something else first. I do like Vendilion Click. I still like keeping all the Spell Quellers, even though it turns on their removal. Obstructionist doesn't have much applications here, right? I'm trying to think. Yeah, it seems pretty loose here. It's just going to be a 3/1 Flash Flyer. At its, I mean, we could get a fetch land, but that's not making much good use of our mana here. So let's see. I do like Rest in Peace. It's if we bring in 2 Rest in Peace, there could be an argument to cut some amount of Snapcaster Mages, because we do play 4. We play a lot of Snapcaster Mages, and Rest in Peace will straight up turn them into, it will ruin our Snap Path lines. However, burning them out is also one of the best ways to win. So I'm actually, okay, so because this matchup can actually a lot of time go late, I think cutting Mana Leak is sure can be correct here. And we'll bring in the Rest in Pieces. We'll cut one Snapcaster Mage, bring in a Geist, and then maybe cut one Helix, bring in another Geist, and then we can just get really aggressive in this matchup, and just try to get them dead as fast as possible. There could be also some argument to cutting Cryptic Commands, actually. I may be sideboarding a little bit incorrectly. So the reason we could bring in Cryptic Command is because Stubborn Denial is a really big tempo hit if we try to tap out 4 mana. So with that said, Snapcaster Mage is still great if we don't draw Rest in Peace. Yeah, I think the 3rd Cryptic is still better than the 4th Helix, though. So overall, I think this configuration is good. I may have had some backwards logic there regarding Logic Knot and Rest in Peace. But overall, this hand is actually pretty good. I think I want to go Serum Visions turn 1 so I can have Logic Knot for X equals 1 on turn 2. This may mean we may not be able to cast Spell Queller on turn 3. But it all depends what our opponent does here. So sure, Serum Visions. See, what did our opponent do? Top. Well, that's great. So this plane's decent draw, but not the best thing in the world. All right, so Spell Queller, Cryptic Command. I kind of like both of these cards, right? So we don't have a way to actually deal with like a Delve threat yet. That's the only issue with this hand. Cryptic Command I still like though, because it's something to do with all this mana that we have in hand. Yeah, I'm actually gonna go top, and I know that's gonna seem a little weird, but I think we have time in this matchup. Like literally, unless they go Thought Scour into Gurmag Angler right here, we're gonna be okay. Yep. I'm gonna hit F6 here. Just let our opponent do their thing. So now, I don't think there's any scenario we get hit by like a Delve Creature. Alright, yep, there goes Spell Queller. It is one of the best cards in the matchup. Oh, they have another. Alright, so there goes Logic Knot. Which means we are just going to go ahead and cast Celestial Colonnade. I mean, play out Celestial Colonnade here. Sure, so we drew our other Spell Queller. So now because we don't have a turn 2 play, that's what Shadow does. They can sometimes just get really under you on the play. Our hope is that they don't have a threat. Okay, that's also pretty good. But it's also not like a threat. And they're cracking it right now. That means they still have mana here for whatchamacallit, for like a Gurmag Angler or a Tasigur, which could be what we're getting hit by here. So our opponent could be perfectly getting under us here. Thoughtseize, wow. Okay, so a lot of hand disruption. Alright, there goes Spell Queller. Maybe I should have positioned them the other way. I don't know. Here we can just go ahead and play out this Scalding Tarn. We'll crack this fetch end of turn. Sure. So now worst case scenario for us is our opponent has Delve Threat plus Stubborn Denial. And that's basically always the worst case scenario, right? Death Shadow doesn't quite do it here because they're at 10 life, although they could easily lose 10 life, or lose another life point here. So bottom is a good sign. Alright, so it looks like they are probably casting a Death Shadow, and they probably are representing Stubborn Denial. Interesting they get an island here. Snapcaster Mage, okay. I wonder what they're going to target. Serum Visions. Okay. Sure. There's nothing we can do about that. Let's see. So they go bottom, top. Alright. So now we have an option here. We can Lightning Bolt that Snapcaster Mage. I don't think that's a winning line. And I think this Lightning Bolt could very well go upstairs this game. Lightning Helix is nice. We can go ahead and just play out this island and represent Cryptic Command. And if our opponent Stubborn Denials it, that is what it is. So I guess we're going to get smacked for 2 here. And let's see if our opponent topped some sort of Delve threat. Alright, there's a land. 3, Liliana. So I'm going to go ahead and try to counter that. We are in Stubborn Denial range for just natural Stubborn Denial. Yeah, sure, that makes sense. No. Okay, so they're just going to tick that up. It's going to be largely irrelevant for now, especially if we can cobble up the burn kill. Which we look like we're on track to do, right? If we go... So our opponent having Fatal Push in hand would be one of the worst things, right? But now they're going to be dead to 2 Colonnade hits. And if Liliana the Last Hope becomes some sort of problem, we can, deal with it down the road, hopefully. Death Shadow. Oof. Okay. So this turns on Stubborn Denial, right? So the question is, do we want to use one of our spells right now? Death Shadow is a pretty good card here. So if we attack with Colonnade next turn, our opponent goes down to 4. Death Shadow becomes a 9. And we'll be at 15 after the Snapcaster Mage hit. And 9 plus 2 is 11. We'd go to 4. And Helix would be neutral here. Neutral with Death Shadow, right? So maybe it's worth it to just throw this Lightning Helix upstairs now. Or maybe it's just worth it to hit Snapcaster Mage, because if they have Fatal Push, they have Fatal Push, right? And then our kill is already pretty slow. Oh, but then they can Then they can get back Snapcaster Mage with Liliana the Last Hope. And they could get back Stubborn Denial. Yeah, so I'm just gonna go ahead and send that upstairs right now while we still can. No. We go up to 20, then we'll go down to 18. We still shouldn't be dead. I'll Spellbomb. Okay. Sure. Okay, alright. So right now we're on that Colonnade kill plan. So unless our opponent drew another threat at this very second, we should be in a pretty good spot. Right, we'll get our opponent down. Alright, Serum Visions is pretty good. One of the better cards they could have drawn here. And they just concede. I think that was a bit of an early concession. Right, because we attack with Colonnade for 4 on our turn. Yeah, I think it was a bit early, but either way, we were doing pretty well that match. All right, so that's how we beat Grixis Shadow. Game 1 with the burn plan, basically. Just a glorified burn deck. But yeah, stay tuned for the next round here with Jeskai Queller. See you soon.